Finally, tonight, activists are turning to a new form of protest to call attention to the climate crisis. Over the past few months, climate protesters have targeted priceless works of art, making for viral moments that grab attention. But is the message getting through? Tonight, we look at how these polarizing protests could be both helping and hurting the fight against climate change. Visitors at the National Gallery in London stood stunned as two young activists glued themselves beneath an exhibit of Vincent van Gogh's Sunflowers.
What is worth more, art or life? Is it worth more than food? Worth more than justice?
The protest went viral, making international headlines. The environmental activists demand no new oil or gas licenses from the British government. Emma Brown, a spokesperson for Just Stop Oil, the group responsible, says the shock factor is intentional.
There is that moment where someone goes, "Oh, security!" and that kind of outrage that people feel is justified. It is shocking what we're doing. If we take action that people can ignore, so if we stood in a park somewhere with some placards and people didn't know about it, it didn't disturb them, they didn't even hear about it, that would be a completely ineffective form of protest.
And these protesters are not alone. In the Australian capital of Canberra, activists scrawled blue marker across an Andy Warhol painting.
We're in a climate emergency.
Outside Berlin, protesters flashed mashed potatoes across the work of Claude Monet.
Wir sind in einer Klimakatastrophe.
And in Paris, one of the world's most famous artworks, the Mona Lisa, smeared with cake. Each time, bystanders were left in disbelief. And headlines followed. But in the media coverage, most of the protests were reduced to acts of vandalism.
I think it's interesting because that artwork was not vandalized. It had a sheet of glass on it. So really what everyone was becoming so outraged about was a bit of soup thrown on a piece of glass. And unfortunately, there's no pane of glass protecting the life support systems that we need to survive, There's no pane of glass protecting the people in Pakistan from the devastating flooding. There's no pane of glass protecting the 146 million people in Africa that are suffering like drought-related starvation.
Bill McKibben is an author and environmental activist who founded the organizations Third Act and 350.org. He says though previous climate protests have been different, he understands the underlying message in these new demonstrations.
We live in an incredibly beautiful world, filled with almost unbelievable treasures. And we are desecrating and destroying those treasures every hour of every day. It doesn't seem, in that context, quite so shocking that people decide that they might throw a can of soup on the glass pane over a painting. I think it's a way to try and get people to understand that much larger desecration that's underway. If you don't like one kind of protest, then figure out another, because left to its own devices, inertia and vested interest are going to win this existential fight.
Millions of people are dying.
Others in the climate space question the effectiveness of these recent protests.
Who's the target? Is it Van Gogh? What did he do to create the climate crisis?
Michael Mann is an author, professor, and climate scientist who studies the effectiveness of climate communication.
There just wasn't a sensible connection. The headline, would say, protesters throw soup on Van Gogh's Sunflowers. Only if you got to, paragraph 6 did you learn that the painting wasn't actually damaged.
In two recent surveys conducted by the University of Pennsylvania, Mann found that the protests set back public support for climate causes across the board.
It played poorly with independents, who are sort of a key swing vote in winning over more support for more aggressive climate action. And it played bad with Democrats, even people who are sort of generally overwhelmingly on board with climate action. It turned them off, even if they knew that the painting was preserved.
But some scholars in the environmental justice field say that disruptive, nonviolent protest has, in some instances, spurred dialogue and even change. Shannon Gibson researches social movements and climate governance at the University of Southern California.
We've had tons of examples in history of civil disobedience like these. So they're drawing on predecessors for sure. And I think that in some cases they are justified, right? We've had 30 years of climate negotiations and fairly little progress. And they're saying we've done it your way for decades. And now it's time to be loud. It's time to be rowdy.
We're going to be noisy. We're going to be disruptive. We're going to be unignorable. We're going to be a pain in the ass until you listen to us.
It would be tragic if these protests were instead driving people to the other side, to the side of the polluters. Let's make sure that the public is getting the right message.
As advocates debate the merits of targeting great works of art to spur action on climate change.